Today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in the latter half of January. As you can see, I read quite a few, so we're going to have to get started. The first novel that I read in the second half of January was The Inside of Out. It is about a girl named Daisy, and her best friend Hannah has just come out, and so Daisy wants to be super supportive, and she decides to go full on enthusiastic about showing that support. So she joins the LGBTQIA+ alliance at their school when a news reporter from college kind of sheds a light on what she's been doing and how she plans to make the voices of the LGBTQIA+ community heard at her school. She finds herself thrust into an unwanted spotlight when all she really wanted to do was show support for her best friend. There's a lot of other things going on in the story, but that's the main thread of it. I still think that Jen Marie Thorne has a really great way with words. She really knows how to bring her characters to life, to bring complicated situations to the forefront, and I think that's what made this novel so interesting. Admittedly, it took me a while to warm up to Daisy herself because she was such a frustrating character. She made choices that I didn't necessarily think were right. She kind of co-opted things that I don't think she should have. But as someone who is learning how to be supportive in this new world that Han has kind of opened the door to, I could understand how she kind of didn't know how to react. And she really does grow as a character, so that is really great. All in all, I think it was a really interesting look at how the entire world can shift when something new changes a relationship that they've relied on and known. It also tackles preconceived notions of things. It was really frustrating to read, especially the first half, but it does end on a pretty strong note, and I think for that alone, and for the growth of Daisy's character on the whole, I'd have to say that it was well worth a read. The next book that I read was Alight We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, and I've actually done a full review for this one, so I'll link to that down below. It's so good, you guys. It is a historical fiction novel. It's about two individuals. It's about Werner, a young German orphan who is brought up to be part of the youth army in Germany, and it's about Marie-Laure, a young girl who goes blind, and she and her father escape from Paris to a town on the coast called Saint Malo. And their stories are very separate at first, but there is a point in time where they meet, and it just chronicles a lot of years in their life actually, and I really adored it. The writing style was very different from what I'm used to in historical fiction because it was short, choppy chapters, but it somehow made it seem even more intense. I won't really get into this one anymore because I really gushed about it in that review, so just check that one out if you want my full thoughts on it, but it was amazing. The next book that I read was I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith, and I've been meaning to read this one for the longest time. And I finally did. It's about a girl named Cassandra Mortmain, and she lives in the ruins of a castle with her father, her stepmother, her brother, and her sister. And she is journaling in this book about their life over the course of, I think it's a year. This book reminded me so much of Anne of Green Gables, crossed with Jane Austen. It's a very simple story, but it's also really emotional. There are a lot of things going on, especially because it's narrated through Cassandra's eyes, so you kind of get the brunt of her feelings told from her, since it's told from her perspective. And I really love that. I think it was just so funny, and it was so thoughtfully written, and I really enjoyed the writing style, so I'm glad I finally gave this one a read. And then I read a whole bunch of review books, the first of which was A Tragic Kind of Wonderful by Eric Lindstrom, and this is a YA contemporary novel out on February 7th, which I think will be tomorrow if I'm posting this video at the right time. It's about a girl named Mel Hannigan, and she has bipolar disorder. She's hidden it really well from her friends and her co-workers, and for the most part, she's always been afraid of revealing it because she doesn't know how other people are going to treat her, but she's kind of forced to when something happens. It actually surprised me how much of this book came before the big moment of revelation. I think it was really interesting to see how Mel managed her bipolar disorder. She had therapy, I believe she had a couple of medications, she had someone she talked to. Her family was actually quite aware because her aunt also has a form of bipolar disorder and her mom is aware of it, and so is her dad. I thought that for something that's so short, it's a very short book, it packed a lot into it. I enjoyed seeing how she dealt with bipolar disorder. I liked seeing how her relationships were affected by it, and what happened when it came out into the light that it was something she did have and was diagnosed with. This is the first book that I've read from Eric Lindstrom, but it actually made me want to check out his other book as well. The next review book I read was Blueberry Pancakes Forever by Angelica Banks. This is the third book in the Tuesday McGillicuddy series, and it was really good. This is the final book, and the adventure that happens in this one was really unexpected for me. I wasn't sure where they were going to take it, but what happens is that Tuesday ends up kidnapped by a former sort of imaginary person in her mom's life and taken to the world of stories, and it's up to Tuesday's mom and her friends to get her back. It is as whimsical and wonderful as the first two novels in this series. I enjoyed being reunited with the characters. I like seeing a different emotional journey for them. It's slightly heavier in terms of story for me, but that wasn't a bad thing at all, and I would highly recommend this series if you are interested in middle grade that is whimsical, wonderful, and very full of imagination. Then I read To Catch a Killer by Cheryl Scarborough. This is about a girl named Erin, and she is famous for being a toddler who survived days by the corpse of her murdered mother. Once again, she is thrust into the limelight as a teen because she discovers the dead body of her biology teacher. She thinks that it's more than just a random murder. She thinks that the person who murdered her mother actually murdered her biology teacher because she and the teacher had teamed up to figure out the specifics of her mother's case. Erin uses her forensic skills and her friends to help her investigate and discover who the killer really is. And while you have to suspend your sense of belief for some of the things that she ends up being capable of doing in this novel, it's actually quite interesting. There were moments that really made me think about who could have done it and why. What I did not like about this book, the one thing that kind of just brought it down for me, was the romance in it. I was not fond of that. I didn't think that it was quite necessary in the story. I feel like sometimes it just got in the way of things and made her make really weird choices. I did like that they brought her sort of adoptive family into the story, and I did like her friends, and I kind of wish they had been around more, but all in all, this one was just an okay YA mystery. The next book I read was Traveler by L.E. Delano, and this is about a girl named Jessa who dreams of this handsome boy in various settings, and one day she meets him in person and she learns that she is a traveler who can go between different realities into different versions of herself, just like the boy whose name is Finn. And Finn has come to warn her because in every single reality that he's known her, she has died somehow. And so in a race to save her own life and make sure that she is not completely wiped out of existence, Jessa and Finn team up to discover who is doing this nasty work of killing her off. This one was interesting. I think the alternate realities idea is always fun, and I like the different realities that Jessa kind of travels to in this book, but I will say that like at the beginning it's kind of slow because it takes a while for her to get to the point where she actually travels into other bodies, and it's actually the alternate realities that I find more interesting than her own reality. It was interesting enough, I'd say, but I don't think it was particularly remarkable. It had a lot of very familiar YA tropes, and the characters themselves were not as well developed as I would have liked them to be, so yeah, this one was just okay. And then I took a break from reading review books and decided to read a whole bunch of manga, and I ended up reading volumes 63 to 72 of Naruto. And if you guys didn't know, I am obsessed with the Naruto TV show and the Naruto Shippuden TV show, and I love the show and I'm still watching it, and I still have to watch the arcs that I read, but I was really eager to find out how it all concludes, so I ended up reading the manga, and it was amazing. I can't really tell you what happens in the issues that I read, but suffice to say that I really just enjoyed seeing how much the characters that I have watched from when they were like 13, 11, 12, 13, I don't even remember, until who they are now as teens is just so incredible. Like Masashi Kishimoto really knows what he's doing when it comes to building characters, and the story itself is really exciting. There was never a dull moment. It explored the relationships, the lore, and it was just so incredible. I'm so satisfied with how it ends. I think it's incredible, and I keep saying incredible, but it was. And then I read Empress of a Thousand Skies by Rhoda Bellezza. This is about two characters. There is Rhiannon, or Rhi, and she is the last surviving heir to the throne, and there is an assassination attempt on her life early on in this book, and aside from surviving it, Rhi is determined to exact revenge on the people who killed her family and who obviously tried to kill her. And then there's Alyosha, or Ali, and he is framed for the murder, and he is determined to prove his innocence. And so these two are on separate journeys in order to make their main goal happen. I liked it more than I thought I would. I think at the beginning it was a little bit difficult for me because there was so much terminology and so many different kinds of species in this book that I kind of was trying to get it all together in my head. That actually ended up being something I liked about it in the end. I warmed up to Allie first because it was really easy to want to root for someone who was clearly the underdog. Rhi, on the other hand, I kind of had a hard time with her at first because she has such a wall around her because all she wants is to exact revenge. And it's really hard for me to be in the mindset of someone like that. Watching these two characters on their separate journeys was very interesting, and I really think that the way Rihanna's journey ended was actually the most satisfying for me. It's gonna be real interesting to see what she does in the next book, because there better be a next book because it would be so sad if there weren't. Allie's journey, on the other hand, I also think it ended fairly well. I just wasn't fond of one aspect of it, which I can't really say because spoilers, but if you want to know, you can just ask. All in all, I definitely enjoyed this one, and I look forward to reading the sequel as well. The next book I read was an e-arc that I downloaded from Edelweiss, and it was Rise of Fire by Sophie Jordan, and that was the sequel to Reign of Shadows. Reign of Shadows ends on a cliffhanger with Fowler and Luna, and Rise of Fire picks up right where that ends. Personally, I'm of the opinion that if those two books had been combined into one long standalone novel, I think I would have enjoyed them both overall a whole lot more. The second novel is not my favorite. I don't think that it wasn't as exciting a story because it's mostly court intrigue as opposed to like the journey that they go on in the first book. I also didn't think that the secondary characters that were introduced were very well developed. Like, they felt very much like caricatures of what they could be, and I wasn't satisfied with that. The romance aspect of it, which was definitely something that, you know, developed from the first book, I wasn't too satisfied with it because I didn't find it all that believable anymore. I don't know, maybe it's just because of the distance between me reading the first book and the second book that affected that. But it was really fast, it was a quick read, it was engaging enough that I kept reading until the end, so there is that going for it. If you've read the first book and you liked it, then definitely check out the sequel. If you were hesitant about the first book, you kind of probably don't have to check out the sequel unless you're really dying to know what's happening to Fowler and Luna. And then I read a e-arc that I downloaded from NetGalley, and that was My Not So Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella. It's been a really long time since I've read a Sophie Kinsella book, but My Not So Perfect Life reminded me why I enjoy her book so much. She writes books with very charming main characters who are in circumstances that feel real and relatable, and she peppers it in with really fun moments and really thoughtful moments as well. The story of My Not So Perfect Life revolves around Katie Brenner. She is determined to make a life for herself in London. In fact, it is her dream, and it has always been her dream, and she is sort of fulfilling it. Not quite as ideal as she would want though. She has a tiny room in a flat she shares with roommates she's not really friendly with. She has a horrible morning commute, and her job is not exactly the greatest. But eventually things shift for her when she gets fired from said job and has to return home for a while to give herself time to recover from that and keep job hunting. So while she's in the middle of her job hunt for something to do in London, she helps her father set up their new retreat-style getaway place at their family farm, and discovers that she's actually pretty good at that. Again, things shift when her former boss, Demeter, shows up at this retreat, and a lot of secrets come out and a lot of truths are revealed. It's just really good, guys. I really enjoyed this one. I think it's mostly because I could find a lot of ways that I related to Katie. I also had an ideal life in mind. I also chased after it. It was also a lot of drudgery involved. It's also like, because I had to do the same thing that Katie does, which is make peace with the fact that, you know, everything that you see online, whether it's on Instagram, Twitter, any form of social media really, any form of like news coverage for people you admire and look up to, it's not always necessarily the full scope of their life and experiences. Aside from that, I really enjoyed the way that Sophie Kinsella explored Katie's relationships. I really liked especially her relationship with her father and her sort of stepmother figure, Biddy. I think that relationship was just the perfect mirror of how complicated it can be sometimes when what your parent wants for you is to be happy and they have an idea in mind of how that is, but you have a different idea of what would make you happy. I also really liked, in the end, her dynamic with her bosses, I think like that was really fun to watch as well. The one reservation that I will mention, however, is that the romance was not my favorite part of it. It was a really good read and I would highly recommend checking it out. So the next e-arc that I read was also from NetGalley, and it was Winter Song by S.J. Jones. This has been pitched as a labyrinth retelling. It's the story of Liesel. She's very devoted to her family. She sacrifices a lot for them. She also wishes that she was given the room to compose and work with music. But everything in her life changes when she encounters a former childhood playmate, aka the Goblin King. She eventually has to travel underground in order to rescue her sister Kat, who ends up kidnapped by the Goblin King. Only in order to secure Kat's freedom, she herself must promise to wed the Goblin King, as a sacrifice is needed to make sure that winter does not last forever. While she's underground, she discovers that she still feels a kinship and connection to the Goblin King, and a romance slowly develops between them. But not only that, she's also given time to work on her music, and it is the freedom that she's always wanted. But there's a lot of sacrifice involved, and she and the Goblin King both must decide what is worth sacrificing. This novel gave me very mixed feelings because the first half of it is all about Liesel's journey to save her sister Kath underground. I am a sucker for sibling stories and daring rescues, and I got both in that first half of the book, and it was really good. It was so immersive. The world itself was like incredible. Like I really felt like I was with Liesel wherever she was, in the village, in the inn, in the grove, underground. It was so vivid to me, and I loved that a lot. I also just really enjoyed seeing Liesel sort of grow up a little bit, because she was a bit selfish and self-centered at the first part of the book, and she only focused on specific people and things in her life, and she didn't really pay attention to some other people in her life, like her sister Kath. But I really like seeing that she realized how important it was to her to keep her connection to her sister alive and how much she loved her sister, and that was great. I also thought like the kind of push and pull between her and the Goblin King was really fascinating. But when we get to the second half of the novel, where it centers heavily on the romance with a little bit of her musical sessions thrown in, I didn't love it. I don't know, I just didn't. Like I sometimes felt like I could ship them, and then there were other times where I was just like, alright, okay, I guess that's where that's going. That's why mixed feelings, because I really liked the first part, and then the second part kind of like threw me into a tizzy. I don't know, it just gave me a lot of mixed feelings, guys. I don't think it's a book that I could generally recommend to read. If you're interested in the idea of a labyrinth retelling, just remember that that primarily applies to the first part, and that it's more romance heavy in the second part. That's probably all I'm going to be able to say, because mixed feelings. I read The Bone Queen by Alison Croghan, and this is a prequel book actually for her other series, The Books of Pelennor. In the Books of Pelennor, there is a character named Cadvan, and this is his story before the events of those books. It was interesting to me because I do remember Cadvan. Like, I have read the Books of Pelennor, although it was like years and years ago, so I only remember like big things about it. But Cadvan is one of the things I remember, so it was definitely an instant must-read for me when I heard about this book. And I have to say it was pretty satisfying. It does take a while to get used to Alison Croghan's writing style because it's very dry and it's very dense. She narrates her stories as if she was translating historical documents that have been uncovered. I definitely thought Cadvan's story was interesting. It does reveal the root of a lot of things that happen in the Books of Pelennor, which is why I can't really go into specifics, but suffice to say that he has to fight a big bad evil that he himself has unleashed on the world. You could probably read it without reading the Books of Pelennor. You're just gonna miss like the little hints that are sprinkled in throughout it. I am glad that I gave this one a shot. And then I read Zodiac Star Force by the Power of Astra by Kevin Panetta and illustrated by Paulina Ganucheau. It is about 4 girls. I believe their names are Emma, Molly, Kim, and Savannah. And together they have been given magical abilities that are inspired by their zodiac signs. This is actually an interesting one because it takes place after they've defeated the big bad. So it's in the middle of their story. And they've sort of disbanded because they don't really have anything to fight for anymore. But personal circumstances and the appearance of more monsters brings them back together, and they are forced to face and confront a lot of things in this one. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. It feels like such a modern take on a familiar sort of story. I would like to get to know the characters more. I feel like we do get a really good glimpse into who they are as individuals in this one, but it would be so fun to explore their dynamic even more in the upcoming stories. This is like a second origin story for them, I guess, because they had to reform the team, and I think it was really, really fun to read, so I would highly recommend this one. And the last thing that I read in the month of January was a manga. It is the first volume of a manga series that I am now completely obsessed with and need to read the rest for, and it is Fruits Basket Volume 1. This is the collector's edition and it's 400 pages of awesomeness. I don't think I've laughed out loud reading a manga novel since I read Oran, High School Host Club, and even that I watched the anime first, but oh my gosh, you guys, it is such a ridiculous premise. It's basically this girl who discovers that there is a family of individuals that when they are hugged by the opposite sex, they turn into an animal of the Zodiac. And yes, it's ridiculous, but it is so funny. And there's also such a heartfelt story beneath that because the girl is, you know, going through her own things, and it's just so fun. I just enjoy it so much. I can't even decide who my favorite character is yet because I've only gotten to know, I think, 4 or 5 of the Zodiac members, but I love it so much and I'm so excited to continue the series. So there you have it, guys. These are all the books that I read in the second half of January, and I'm really excited that most of them were really interesting, good reads. I hope that you guys found this video interesting and informative. If you have any more questions about the books, do let me know. I would be more than happy to discuss them. If you've read any of these books, tell me what you thought in the comments, whether you love them, whether you hated them. I would love to hear it, and I'll be back with another video soon. See ya! Oh, don't forget to sign up for the Love-a-thon. It's happening on the weekend of February 18 and 19, and if you didn't know, it started as a book blogger event, but has now expanded to include the Bookstagram and BookTube communities. It is an event that celebrates our love of books. It celebrates our love of this online community that has grown in the many years since it began. And I would really, really love it if you guys joined. My co-hosts are C from the novel Hermit, Kristen from Super Space Chick, and Mel from the Daily Prophecy. I'll leave links to their blogs and Kristen's channel down below, and I will also leave a link to where you can sign up. I would love to have you join us. It's gonna be so much fun, and it's also a very low pressure event, so you don't have to feel obligated to do every single thing that we've got planned, although it's all gonna be really fun.